Hello, I'm Gareth. Welcome back to Somewhere on Earth, and it's Tuesday, the 5th of December, 2023. We're here in London, and we have voices today from Iceland and Scotland. And one of our voices today comes from Glenn Boddington, studio expert, presenter's friend, co-host. I never quite know how to refer to you, but we've known each other for ages.
You're a
regular right here on this podcast, and we love hearing your expertise and the number of brilliant ways that you get out of trouble, basically. That's what you're here to do. But also, just before we get into the show, you're always so busy. So what bits of tech wonder have you been up to recently?
Well, I've been working hard on a new project, a new research to practice project. Will come out as a real thing somehow, called My AI Hybrid Biotwin. And I'm basically, it's through my university professorship, and I'm looking at the whole area of human twins, digital twins, and the complex amalgamation now that's starting to happen, but exploring these multiple digital twins to see whether we could have our own digital twin that was with us from birth, that grew up alongside me, learned about the world alongside me, collaborated with me, and represented me across time and space, and even beyond death. So looking at both sides of that, the digital twin itself, the modelling, the amalgamation, all these different things that are out there, but also at the data ethics in it and data ownership.
Oh, yeah, huge issues there.
Yes.
And, I mean, just really briefly then, the digital twin idea. When you say that for instance, well, let's just say, imagine I'm a baby and I've just been born and I'm going to have my own digital twin for life. What do they scan me? Do they take my genome and put it into a computer? How does the digital twin happen from birth?
Well, that's part of the research, and I'm working with about 15 experts from different areas, some from that medical area, genomic, etc., others from fitness and health and well-being, of course, but also from training, from the AI side, the ChatGPT model of the assistant, the person that's working with you, the software that's working with you all the time. And yeah, it's actually, how do we link our biometrics in? Well, that's happening in fitness terms anyway. How do we link our biomarkers in? Yes, it's starting to happen through implants and through medical stuff. How do we link in our intelligence, our learning through those different ways of an AI possibly growing with us? So, yep, that's going to be coming out across the next 2 years, and I can keep popping in some bits about it if you like as well.
So fascinated to keep up with that as the research develops. It's this early stage, and I feel that there's just so far to go on it, obviously.
There is a long way to go on it.
Why you're researching it. And a really quick plug for the university. Where's it happening?
Oh, it's University of Greenwich that I'm linked to. And I'm also working with Kingston University on this project too.
Great. Glenn, thank you. All right, let's crack on with the rest of the programme. And coming up today... Is it a programme? Is it a podcast? Is it a show? Oh, gosh, we evade all definition. Anyway, we do have today some technology that could save your life. It has some automation, some infrared, there are drones involved, and there's AI. There's bound to be AI. Also today, the app where Icelanders have been finding out how related they are to the singer Björk. But there is a serious story here as well about research into inherited diseases. Oh, and also, just while I remember to keep my promise from last week, I'll tell you why we tend to hate the sound of our own voice in recordings. And it seems, actually, to be honest, as if we liked the sound of our own voices a bit too much last week, because we had one listener comment along the lines of, love the show, but it was a bit long. All right, agreed. Hint taken. So we're hitting the brevity button this week. So let's crack on with it. All right, first, it's a lifeboat. And it has no crew, so it goes out in dangerous waters, so no human crews have to risk their lives. That's the basic idea, but let's get loads more detail now from Sam Mayall, who is the founder of the company Zelim. Sam, welcome to the podcast.
Good to meet you all. Delighted to be on the show.
Awesome. Right. Okay. So let's get into a bit of the background here, which I suppose is a little bit obvious, that we know that lifeboats go out in very dangerous waters often, and there is a risk to human life. Just pick that up for us, and how taking that risk, you decided to try and develop something from that.
My background was a sailor working at sea, and unfortunately I was involved in a couple of fatal accidents where I lost a couple of mates. And the key thing we're always battling against is the time frame to find people in the water, time frame to rescue people in the water. And then that coupled with the risk element, and people assume you put your hero capes on and off you go, jump in the lifeboats and everything's going to be fine. The reality is quite different. And lifeboats are actually the third biggest killer of seafarers, predominantly through testing and then operations as well.
Wow. I mean, which of course, the whole thing is that you're going in after one casualty and then creating other casualties. Of course, if the risk assessment is wrong, or if there isn't time for a risk assessment because things are happening so quickly. So tell me about this lifeboat of yours. You've been putting it through sea trials, as I understand, and we're talking here about an autonomous lifeboat, no crew involved. Describe it for us.
So the lifeboats we're building are exactly as you suggest. They are uncrewed lifeboats. They use an AI-based vision system to autonomously detect people in the water. They've then got a conveyor recovery system to pull people out of the water, and then a casualty handling platform once the guys are on board to ultimately rescue those casualties quickly and take the decision out of the master's hands. Am I going to launch the rescue boat, if in particular if the weather's bad?
So let's talk about the machine vision. Then I do want to talk about that sort of conveyor thing that hauls the casualty on board. So first of all, then, give us a sense of the technology, the innovation here in these very difficult conditions. You've got lots of water everywhere. It's salt water. It's very corrosive. Everything is acting against you. And yet you have to have machines that have reliable vision. So tell me about that.
So the AI solutions and the command and control are sort of off-the-shelf components as far as possible. The novel bit about what we've created is a patented way of image processing to denoise the marine environment, take out the waves, take out the spray, mist and the fog, and then overlay that with AI. So we've built what we believe is the world's biggest data set of people and casualties in the water, and then trained our models over the last 3 years in partnership with the UK and US Coast Guard to really give that high reliability in the system.
Well, look, I mean, that already sounds like a huge challenge. And I'll put this to Galen as well, if you want to pick it up, Galen, that you've got to spot a casualty. So you train your machine learning with lots of images of casualties. But for one thing, the vessel is on the water. So it's not as if you have a top-down view looking down on the casualty, or that you're probably about to tell me that drones are involved, and we'll hear about that aspect. But just, Galen, initially about your reaction to this very challenging machine learning environment.
No, it's fascinating. And I think you've done great work here bringing together the Coast Guard's UK and US to work on it, and having this incredible 5 million images, I think it said in one of your reports, of real life people in water, taking away the aspects of it, so that I guess the AI is able to tell the difference between, I'm going to ask a really basic question here, a person who needs rescuing from water and something like a buoy that's got lost in the sea.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you guys know, the fundamentals of AI is pattern matching, essentially. So that's where the intelligent labeling comes in. We also label within the system buoys, flotsam and jetsam, life rafts, boats, these kind of things. So the system, if you're looking for stuff like that, can throw that up as a detection, or if you're not looking for it, it actively ignores it.
Interesting. So this AI that you've developed could also be used to indicate where in the ocean there is rubbish and stuff, pollution hanging out or floating around.
Absolutely, yeah. Certain customers are asking for, exactly as you say, pollution monitoring and marine mammal monitoring, believe it or not.
Well, wow. Yeah, I mean, If you've gone to all the trouble of developing the model, then it's great if you can use it in other ways. But what about that point then, that the vessel is at sea level, and so just in that kind of environment, especially with lots of waves all over the place, it might be quite difficult to spot anything and even be able to discern it from a casualty to flotsam and jetsam. Because I know you use drones in some way. I'm just wondering if part of it is that a drone is accompanying the lifeboat in order to get get more of a kind of, as it were, bird's eye or drone's eye vision?
That's the optimum. The higher you are, the easier it is. And obviously the less movement you have. So software we've built is totally sensor agnostic, so you can run it off virtually any sensor. It's a relatively small boat in quite a big sea, so we use software stabilization to stabilize the image, and then an intelligent track. So if the software picks up a person, and you're not always going to see them if you're in a big sea state, everything's moving, and you might only see them for a fraction of a second. So as soon as the software has detected them, it then puts on an intelligent track to go, where are we likely to see that person again?
There's a lot going on under the bonnet, and of course all of it being processed in real time. So yeah, it's not as if you can just get a load of data and render it later on. But what about, I'm intrigued about how you haul the casualty out of the water. And at the beginning of your answer, you did mention this. It's kind of like a belt, isn't it? A bit like what you have in the supermarket with your groceries going along it, but at an angle so that it points down into the sea, so that somebody can be hauled aboard. Tell me more.
It's a conveyor recovery system, so it's not that dissimilar to a conveyor that you'd see in a supermarket, or indeed picking potatoes out of a field. We've designed a kind of a frame around that's motion compensated. So as the boat is pitching and rolling in the seaway, the conveyor moves independently of the boat. It's then submerged about half a metre below the surface of the water. So as the boat drives towards that person, it's going to hit you approximately at waist level. And then once you've made contact with the conveyor, you're then brought up onto the vessel in sub 10 seconds. And then we've designed a casualty handling platform then that looks at the human mechanics of how bodies work, to then move the casualty then back into the survival area. And then once you're on board, you've then got access to two-way communication and remote telemedicine.
That's fascinating and really well thought through. It's amazing that you can have this immediate kind of platform where actually is helping you assess yourself. And as you said, bringing to the forefront your analytical side of actually being able to, with telepresence medicine team, be able to analyse yourself and what you need, and realising you're out of the sea and actually you've got to move on to actually helping the other end, the remote end, where you've got the experts know how bad you are and whatever help you need as soon as a bigger vessel maybe reaches you.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly the idea.
And Sam, just before we wrap it up then, where are we at the moment then? Are you doing sea trials? Have you got that far? Or is it out there actually in the high seas saving people's lives yet?
So the first vessel is being painted today. So we've done a number of prototypes. We've done over 1,000 rescues. And then the first certified version will be in the water in January. And then that's going to customers in the North Sea next year to go and save people's lives if required.
All right. Will you stay in touch with us as you go along? Tell us how you're getting on.
We'll certainly tell you how we're getting on, but follow us on LinkedIn, on our website, Facebook, etc.
Fantastic work, really very well thought through and detailed work into both the psychology and the technology and how to link that up. Yeah. I'm sure you'll find, and I'm pretty certain there will be multiple other uses for this that expand and help you as a company as well. I hope so.
Sam Mayall, massive thanks for being here on Somewhere on Earth. That is Sam Mayall. He's with Zelim, so it's Zelim if you want to look them up. And we will link Sam to you and Zelim from our own social media as well. So Sam, thanks a lot.
Thanks ever so much, guys. Chat again in the new year.
Will do. All right, and speaking of social media, I'll give you all the main kind of details at the end of the programme, show, podcast, whatever we are. But, just throw one in here, just Twitter/X, then we are at SOEP Tech, so that's SOEP Tech, and we're on Facebook as well. We're also on WhatsApp.
Yes. And we have a message.
We sure do. So this comes from a listener who took up our plea, really. I was going to say an offer, a plea last week to leave a voice note for us. So, and they did this, by the way, to this number, international code 44 7486 329 484 7486 329 484. And have a little listen.
Hello from Gauri Abhiram, Hyderabad, India. I had been a long-term listener of the BBC Digital Planet podcast and was very disappointed when it ended after 21 years in March 2023. As Gareth would say, I was massively happy to find Anya, Gareth, Glenn Boddington, Angelica Mari and others coming together for the Somewhere on Earth podcast. Many thanks to Mr. Nana Boffer, CEO Quintes, and others who have invested in this podcast. It was nice to listen to Mr. Boffer on the second episode, speaking about the importance of podcasting technology as today's equivalent of the transistor radio, which democratizes knowledge and information sharing. I could relate to him when he was speaking about back in 1989, when he was a 17-year-old in Ghana, listening to the BBC World Service on his radio, and how the radio made him feel so close to events happening thousands of miles away, which podcasting does today. I feel the same way while listening to this podcast. Best wishes to the Somewhere on Earth podcast team for this podcast to grow and develop in the months and years ahead.
Oh, lovely to hear from Gowrie there, isn't it?
It is, isn't it?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, one of our favourite people, actually, and full of great ideas and outputs herself, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
And, of course, we would like to say we don't have favouritism to our listeners, apart from just one or two. So we will make that exception for Gowrie. And I think justified favouritism, because she just got right in there and left us a voice note. So, yeah, they're beginning to trickle in now, these voice notes. And I think it's partly because listeners took note of my encouraging words last week not to worry about what your voice sounds like, folks. You all sound brilliant. So don't worry about it. Leave us a voice note. Gave you that number at the top. Just jog back on your podcatcher if you want to go and listen to that number again. Okay, now, here's something rather exciting, though. You know the famous Icelandic singer Björk? I think you're a fan, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
Well, we've only gone and tracked down one of her relatives. Ooh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Bit of a scoop. So who is this relative? Is it a sibling, maybe, or a cousin? Well, actually, someone related to her, 8 times removed. So not very close
Quite
at
distant,
all, really.
Yes.
So look, I know that sounds a little bit tenuous, but it all makes sense when you discover that Icelanders love their genealogy. And of course, many people in that country, they love their technology. So if you bring all that together, you end up with Íslendingabók. Now, this is a free database and app that holds the genealogical details of almost the entire population going back to the 9th century when the first Viking and Celtic settlers arrived there. Now, Íslendingabók, the name of this brilliantly named app, it actually means the Book of Icelanders. And it's proven to be a real hit as users trace relatives or indeed find out how related they are to Björk. But just as crucially, all that information about people and families enables important research into inherited genetic diseases. And in fact, back in 2013, in my BBC days, I interviewed Carrie Stephenson about the app, and he's an Icelandic geneticist. He's also founder and CEO of Decode Genetics. And a decade on, wouldn't you just know it, but our reporter mate, Snezana Curcic, she was hanging out in Iceland, so she dropped in to see Carrie for an update. And obviously, the first thing that Snezana wanted to know was a bit about how the app works. So on the way to meet Carrie, she also dropped in with a friend called Anna Kristjandóttir, and together they just checked out the app.
Can you just quickly open the
Sure.
app? Or...
Yep. I just put in Íslendingabók. It's here. And here it is. Just put in my phone number, and then my phone will act as a key or something to get to everything I have. I'm here. What do you want to search? Just someone famous like Björk.
Do you want to see if you're related to her?
Yeah, why not? Björk. And then I need to know her birthday so I can see who is who. And sometimes people put their information in, like this Björk. She's dead now. but she was a business person. This one, another Björk, just was a farmer. And sometimes people actually put their photo, so we can see them.
So are you related to the singer Björk, according to Íslendingabók?
Pick that. No, not related to Björk. My grandfather were related. It's too far apart. So yeah.
So you're related to her like 6-7 generations down the line.
8 generations. You can see it here.
Yeah.
So no, I'm not related to Björk.
Excellent, it's fun.
Yeah, fun to look at people and see, oh, you're related. Oh.
I'm on my way to meet with Kari Stephenson, a founder of Decode, a world's leader in human genetics based here. Decode developed Íslendingabók and use it as one of the tools in research in the field of medical genetics. And I want to start with understanding the root of the national fascination with genealogy.
Icelanders have been passionately interested in genealogy for 1100 years. If you look at the old Icelandic sagas that were written 1,000 years ago, they all begin with a page after page after page of genealogy. And it's interesting, why were they so focused on genealogy? I think that was basically the way of the common man to make sure that he wouldn't be forgotten. And then over the centuries we have continued to be focused on and interested in genealogy. So enormous amount of data on genealogy existed in church records, in books all over the place. And what we simply did is that we assembled this into a computerized database. The idea behind that, from our point of view, was to have the genealogy as some sort of denominator in our genetics work. But because we were taking advantage of data that existed because of the interest of the people in the country, we thought it would be appropriate to provide access to Íslendingabók to everyone in the country, and we have done that. And it has been extraordinarily popular. People are constantly plowing through the genealogy database, trying to figure out who is related to whom, etc.
What are the applications, or what are the tools that are developed out of this database?
The only reasonable use of this data is to help you to figure out how some human assets are moved from one generation to the next. And when you're working on rare diseases, it's very important to know whether they go in families or not. So having the genealogy database can help you a lot when you're trying to develop your first understanding of human disease. What is it that makes some people vulnerable, makes some people be at a very high risk of a disease and others of low risk, and some people responding positively to drugs and others don't? What is it? What is the biochemistry behind that? And that is what we have been focusing on.
In the interview that you did with Garrett Mitchell, you predicted at that time that there will be tools or applications that would be able to predict the probability of a disease, and that people will be able to access their medical records on their smartphones. Do you remember that?
Yeah, it only goes to show that one of the things that's shared with the rest of you is the inability to predict what happens in the future, and I have to accept that. But everything is moving in this direction. For example, all of these concerns that people have over privacy when it comes to healthcare information is probably going to be best dealt with by making the individual the keeper of his own healthcare information, rather than letting them sit in hospitals or clinics, that the individual will have a software application where he can download all the healthcare information on himself. I think the world is gradually moving in that direction. And that is basically what I was predicting 10 years ago. And as usually, I was far too optimistic.
I want to really focus this interview on the future of the works on genetics that you are doing. And then you said it's a healthcare system, it's precision medicine, and something that can be applied worldwide, I guess.
The sad thing about the genetics of the sort that we are doing, it has pretty much been confined to the study of people of European descent. What you know about the genetics of diseases in Africa in Southeast Asia, in South America, is very little. And the healthcare disparity, the difference in access to good healthcare, begins with lack of understanding of diseases in the minorities or in the people of the third world. If you think about the application of human genetics to generate better healthcare for everyone, the next step is to study the genetics of diseases in the third world. And we have already started to do it in a small way. We have started to get material from India, from Africa, and we are beginning to study that.
We'll be back after a quick break.
Learn how luxury, social conditioning and psychology influence our behaviour every Friday on the Luxury Mind podcast. Unravel myths and explore unseen influences with a healthy dose of humour. Join the Luxury Mind podcast on YouTube and on all major podcast platforms.
But I guess you can map the methods that you used here.
You can take the methods we use here and apply it everywhere, but then it is a matter of financial resources, how we can make sure that people in Africa and people in India and people in South America can really do the type of work we are doing.
I guess it's all down to the funds.
The healthcare disparity is just still another expression of the economic disparity in the world.
Oh, there you go. There's the genealogical geneticist, Kari Stephensen, and he's speaking there to Snezana Curcic. We also heard in that piece from Anna Christian Dottir. Now, Glenn Boddington, I know I'm not trying to sound weird here, but I was kind of watching you while we were playing that out. And there's one bit where you smiled quite broadly, which always gives me a hint as to where to go with you in these little kind of two ways afterwards. And that's about the personal data aspect of all this, and the way that Kari is really saying, look, we just need this genetic data. It needs to be in people's hands. And yeah, you resonate.
Well, you are absolutely right, because I am a big personal data ownership advocate, and it kind of links back into what I was talking about at the beginning of the show, this work on the digital human twin side. I do think we should own our own personal data, our unique data like our heartbeat, our breath, etc., which is part of this digital human twin project. It was just wonderful to hear the discussion that happened there, where someone else, such a brilliant man, has actually been for years going, this is how it has to be, and him saying, well, maybe, I was hoping for a bit of a miracle then, but actually now the debate is back on the table, and it is, because we have got this big issue around digital identity and our ownership of ourselves. But even today, hackers, actually, it's in the news today that hackers have got into one of the bigger testing companies, 23andMe. And 6.9 million users, their information has been hacked. It hasn't included DNA, but it's included ancestry breakdown, genetic testing, personalised health. And that's a huge company, so there's no protection. They can't say you'll be more protected if we own your data or we've got your data. So there's still a long way to look at that and to go on that. And also, of course, there is concerns in those bigger companies, which many people are signing up to. Genetic testing companies, ancestry companies too. It's where the two come together. This debate is very much, the genealogy and the health data coming together to help us to work on predicted diseases in people and longevity potentials, But there is still concerns there where there would be specific targeting of particular ethnic groupings through these kind of tracings of ancestry and genetics, However, another very key point that our professor said was that he was very concerned also that there's just so much of this happening around the world, but actually it's pretty much in Western world terms, Genealogy banks, there are genealogy banks and biobanks now all over the world, and the biobanks, of course, hold all the blood tests, all of the, the tissues, the gene samples as well. They kind of cross over a bit. Many of them are owned by national governments, etc. Some are private, of course, and some countries like China are very well sorted, as is Europe. He mentions in the report too, US, Canada, etc. But that again is still it's very one-sided. It's not one-sided, maybe four-sided rather than hundreds of sides of the people in the world. And the digital disparity that he mentions, I really completely agree with him. There's, we're getting a kind of, for example, the UK biobank is 94% white ethnicity. 94% white ethnicity. Now, that is not really reflecting even the UK population, let alone helping us with actually having unbiased data sets which can allow prediction to go through because they're biased by the nature of who they're coming from.
Yeah, sure. And so medical research that might come from those data sets may be more biased or more likely through data bias to predict outcomes better than in white people than in minority ethnicities.
And also for men rather than women. And that's one of the big ones is women's health. There is not enough data. We tend to, as women, take a lot of medicines and have a lot of treatments which have not really been tested on women at all, or have not really come through data and prediction, which means it's right for women. But it's very interesting, this link, isn't it, between genealogy and the fascination with ancestry, which we've all got. And, those big ancestry dot companies, they're making billions, because people are fascinated about where they came from.
We want to know where we came from.
We do, but it is utterly linking into now this health data stuff, derived family history information on you as an individual, Gareth, can really help know about what chronic diseases that you may encounter in your life.
And we mentioned there that data breach with 23andMe. Now, of course, they're not here to give their side of the story, and we'll look further into it. But just briefly, what did happen there then?
Well, I believe, and it's new news, but what happened was that they weren't actually attacked themselves or hacked themselves. What happened was that old customer passwords, which were somehow out there in the black web anyway, were used to get into their customers and get the data through the customer's use for customers' passwords. Now they've put out immediately telling everyone to change their passwords now. So they've taken immediate action.
All right, that's great, Galen. Well, there you go. Well, I think we shall leave it for this week. It's been lovely to have you back here, Galen. Our conversations just go on, and they're fascinating. But I did say we'd press the brevity button this week. But I do owe the listeners a little bit of science before we go. And you might be interested in this as well,
I think it's
Galen.
fascinating. And
this idea,
very, very fascinating.
Why is it that we don't like the sound of our own voice, or many of us don't, when we hear it played back in a recording? And I'll give you two words, right? And then I'll expand. But bone conduction. These are the important words. All it is that when we talk, there are two ways that the sound gets from our larynx, from our voice box, into our brains, into our ears. So one way is just through the air, like any other sound that's dropping into our ears. But the other way is that the vibrations coming from our larynx then resonate out through all that grey matter, all that brain and bone in between the larynx and our ears. So it's bone conduction. So sound travels differently through that kind of matter than it does through the air. What it does is it helps the lower frequencies, the bass sounds, more than other sounds, which is why a lot of people perceive that they speak with one of those deeper kind of voices than is actually the case in real life. And so one reason people may not like hearing their voice when it's played back, when of course what they're hearing is what the voice sounds like when it's only just been conducted through the air and it's hit a microphone. What they're hearing is maybe a slightly thinner and reedier version of their voice than they think they actually have. And I'm going to blatantly do some pop psychology here, but I'm going to put it to you, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, that not only is it a bit weird to be presented with that slightly thinner voice than perhaps you thought you had, I think it goes much more deeply than that, because our voice is such a big part of our identity. And so to be presented with a version of ourselves that seems so unfamiliar is not just like a bit weird or creeps you out slightly, but it is so wrong that it's a very difficult and quite distressing thing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, when people say, oh, I just don't like the sound of my own voice, I don't think people should shrug that off. They're not being silly. It's this representation of ourselves that is quite different from how we might think of ourselves through our voice, it's really quite a profoundly unnerving thing. So that's not to put people off recording their voices. It's just to say the few times you do hear your voice recorded, you will find it weird. And there's nothing strange about you or vain about you for thinking that. It's entirely normal. But remember that everybody else around you hears that other version of you all the time, and they love you for that. And therefore it shouldn't be an issue when you record your voice. I know it might sound weird, but honestly, folks, you just have to understand that's how the rest of the world hears you, and it's perfectly fine, and you sound great. So there you are.
Yeah, fascinating, absolutely great. Yeah,
Good
really
stuff.
helpful. Thank you, Gareth.
Marvellous. And I've already done the social medias, got that out of the way. So I can just give you an email address, though. hello@somewhereonearth.co. That'll do. Audio today is by Keziah Wenham Kenyon and Dylan Burton here at Lanson's Team Farner. The production manager is Liz Toohey. I've been today with Ghislaine Boddington, and our editor is Anya Literovich. So enjoy your voices, folks. See you next time. Bye.